Welcome to today's episode of Buildings Hub Live, where we spotlight the changemakers and technologies leading the charge to electrify our built environment. On our podcast, we tackle the issues facing building decarbonization, from space heating to water heaters, to electric cooking and beyond. On our first episode of the year, we'll chat with Sara Ross, co-founder of Undaunted K-12, and Ryan Kmetz, Energy Program Manager at the Maryland Energy Administration. Why is building electrification important to student health and performance? How is recent federal funding accelerating the electrification of public schools? And how are various state initiatives supporting this effort? Here's your host, Atlas Public Policy Associate, Kat Schock.
Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the 13th episode of Buildings Hub Live. My name is Kat Schock, Policy Associate at Atlas Public Policy, and I have the honor of being your host today. For today's episode, we'll sit down to discuss developments in the electrification of K-12 public school buildings. Why is building electrification important for student health and performance, and how are state and federal funding supporting electrification in public schools? Stay with us to find out. Before we jump into our discussion today, a quick note on Buildings Hub. Here at Atlas, we manage a one-stop shop data analysis tool for building sector electrification called Buildings Hub. If you're interested in the heat pump market share, state buildings, policies, and funding programs, the current makeup of the U.S. housing stock, federal grants, and crisply designed dashboards, we've got you covered. We just launched our newest dashboard, surfacing all the data from the Energy Information Administration's latest Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey, including data on all electric buildings, heat pump deployment, regional heating mixes, renovation stats, and more, including, actually, progress on the electrification of educational buildings nationwide. Check it out today, and we'd love to have you join the Buildings Hub community. We've put a link to the site here below, so take a look. Now for today's event. We are currently live on YouTube and LinkedIn. We encourage our audience to send over your questions, and we'll pull them in as we go along. You can do so through the Q&A portal on the YouTube live stream. We look forward to hearing from you throughout the episode. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our guests today. We are joined by Sara Ross, co-founder of Undaunted K-12, and Ryan Kmetz, Energy Program Manager at the Maryland Energy Administration. Welcome to the both of you, and thank you so much for being here on Buildings Hub Live today. We have lots to cover in this half hour, so let's jump right in. All right, as a quick introduction, Sara, then Ryan. What are your or your organization's roles in the decarbonization and electrification of K-12 public schools? Sara, please go ahead.
Great. Thanks for having us, Kat. So thrilled to be here. So I'm very proud to be part of Undaunted K-12. We are a national nonprofit that's focused on supporting our public schools to make a rapid and equitable transition to zero carbon and to really prepare young people to build sustainable futures. We work at all levels, federal, state, and the district level, to bring awareness. So thanks for helping us do that today. To support policy in this arena, we also contribute our own thought leadership on these issues. For example, we authored a piece with RMI entitled HVAC Choices for Student Health and Learning, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And almost everything we do is in coalition with others. So that could be with other nonprofits like school board partners or with technical experts that design zero energy schools.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And Ryan, what brings you here today?
Hey, Kat. Thanks so much for having me. Really excited to chat with you all and with Sara. I come from the Maryland Energy Administration. We are the state agency that works on all things energy in the state of Maryland. My specific role is actually our schools decarbonization, where we're working with Maryland's 24 school districts to expand their capacity to manage their energy data, reduce their energy use, reduce their greenhouse gases, and really build schools for the new generation, what the next high performance schools look like, to ensure that our students and our teachers and the support staff at the schools are in healthy buildings that are not only healthy for them, but also ultimately healthy for the environment.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, Sarah, Undaunted K-12 takes a national view of America's K-12 public school sector. From your perspective, what is the status of building electrification in public schools nationwide? What's going on in school leaders' minds across the country as these efforts ramp up?
Great. Yeah, that's a great level setting. Kind of where are we? So I would say we're still very much in early days, right? The vast majority of our school buildings burn fossil fuels. We burn fossil fuels to heat spaces, classrooms, right? We burn to heat water, and we power our school kitchens. Heating spaces, HVAC systems are by far the largest consumers of energy among that set. And when we look across the whole country, in over 70% of our K-12 building space, we're burning fossil fuels on site, mostly gas or oil, to heat those spaces. Mm-hmm. And in cold weather climates, in the colder parts of the country, like where I am at, that number is substantially higher. In the Mid-Atlantic, that number is more like 93% of building space is heated by fossil fuels. In New England, it's 98%. So this is still very much, this is core to how we heat our buildings. Electrification is only really a goal, I would say, for a very small number of schools. The first wave of electric schools has really come about through local demands, right? Local bylaws that are trying to move forward on climate. There's so much inertia in the existing ways of doing things that you have to ask for an all-electric school to get one. It's not just kind of going to fall out. The second wave is really being driven, I would say, by building performance standards, right? So these are standards in some jurisdictions, cities, states, and the District of Columbia, that require building owners to report their building emissions, with a move towards actually imposing fines if buildings emit over a certain threshold level. And so that's creating kind of a second wave, I would say, of all electric schools. And then the third wave that I'm really hopeful that we're starting to see mount is being driven by economics, which is really exciting. And the Inflation Reduction Act, which we'll hopefully talk more about today, which provides substantial incentives for ground source heat pumps, a key technology for all electric buildings. And what we're seeing is the IRA is making ground source heat pumps, such an affordable option that once school leaders that are building the schools make that decision, it's really tempting just to go all the way to an all electric building and avoid paying for bringing that new gas service to the building altogether. So those are kind of the waves of early adopters, the building performance standards pushing schools in some directions, and now hopefully kind of economics creating a third wave of electrification, but still very early days.
Early days, but we're optimistic. Now, Ryan, do you mind talking and level setting about what equity components are at play within public school electrification? How are state agencies like the MEA working to shore up the gap?
Yeah, so MEA, our program right now, we look at all the schools, all the school districts. MEA actually is working with equity in mind when it comes to our funding. And so in Maryland, we have, we call it Maryland Environmental Justice Screening Tool. It's our state version. I know California has their Cal EPA. Federally, it's EJ Screen. But it's a Justice 40 type tool where we're actually looking at where communities are the most overburdened by pollution or climate threats, and then also traditional metrics of just underfunded, and how we can try to not only bring in the new technology to those communities, but really inspire the kids there, show them what a STEM workforce looks like. And it actually piggybacks nicely on some of MEA's other programs where we're working to help train and create that clean energy workforce that we know Maryland and really all the states are going to need as we continue to advance into this century.
Lovely. Passing that same question over to Sarah, how are advocates pursuing that equity work?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, a lot of this electrification work has to happen in our existing buildings. And when we think about responsibly electrifying those buildings, we need two things, right? We need to start with a high quality building envelope. And we need to ensure that building is free from the conditions that would undermine indoor air quality. And broadly speaking, we don't have those things today in our schools, and we certainly don't have those things in many of our low-income communities. So we need states, and Maryland is doing an awesome job of this, and we need the federal government, frankly, to be stepping up their investment in this vital infrastructure so that we're not just relying on local tax bases, because then children in poor communities get poor school buildings and we reinforce inequities. I'm on the board of the BASIC Coalition, and our mission as a national coalition is to advocate for a reliable and robust federal role in modernizing our school facilities, right? That's key. And at Undaunted, we really promote concepts with that states, have them really increasing their investment in low wealth communities in particular, so that we're getting those schools in those communities to that electrification starting line. Because again, we need high quality building envelopes and we need healthy buildings, right, as the starting point for even beginning this electrification work.
Gotcha. So schools in different states are starting at different places, and we need that federal funding to come in to even the playing field. Gotcha. So there's a bit of a mosaic, it sounds like, in state level policy pushing for school electrification nationwide. There are only about a dozen states that have enacted these sorts of policies and programs. Ryan, can you speak to the MEA's Decarbonizing Public Schools program? What is it? What are its goals? And how did it come to be?
Sure. So the program dates back now to about 2012. It came about when our local utility company, Baltimore Gas and Electric, their parent company, Constellation, merged with Exelon. And part of that was the state, as part of the approval process, came up with something called the Customer Investment Fund. And that the whole idea behind this was, how can we get some economic resources to really help energy efficiency and conservation? And Net Zero Schools was really one of the first initiatives to receive any funding through that fund. And so the Public Service Commission approved $9 million of this fund back then, for us to work on creating net zero energy in public schools. And since then, we've managed to build and open 3 net zero public schools in the state of Maryland. There are 2 in the city of Baltimore and 1 in Howard County. There's a 4th one that's under construction. And my goal really for this program is we want to see at least 1 in all of Maryland's 24 different school districts. We don't want this to be a foreign concept for our students. We don't want it to be a foreign concept for our teachers and our support staff and administrators. So I guess that's really the first goal. And then it's to expand and to seek opportunities. And we're not just coming in and saying, oh, you got to do this. We're actually strategically assessing the schools based on what improvements they need. So Sara was talking about, healthy buildings. So we're looking at schools that we know are getting replaced or having major projects done on them. And this program is to kind of complement that and serve as, if you will, the sprinkles on top of your ice cream sundae to sweeten the deal so that you can go to a net zero or almost all electrification. And then also, if you tie our program in with some of the IRA money available, we're seeing the ability to build these net zero schools at approximately the same cost, sometimes even a little bit less than your traditional build, where you're not even thinking about electrification or carbon footprint.
Lovely. So the deal gets even sweeter.
Yes.
Perfect. So you both asserted that electrification is not just a climate issue, but also a public health issue. Broadly, why are building electrification and energy efficiency important for student health and performance? Sara?
Yeah, great point, Kat. So in the paper that we wrote with RMI, HVAC Choices for Student Health and Learning, we highlighted 6 benefits of all electric high performance schools. And you're right, Kat, it's not just dollars and cents, but also some real benefits for student health. So to take just one example, we know that schools are facing more incidents of extreme heat. Many schools do not have air conditioning, so classrooms are heating up. And it turns out that we have evidence that children's learning and performance is impaired by heat. Not surprising. Students taking an exam on a 90-degree day have a roughly 10% lower chance of passing that exam. And we know that this affects students of color disproportionately, with hot school days being responsible for about 5% of the gap in standardized test scores between Black and brown children and their white counterparts. So that's just one of the many examples of the health and learning components of doing this work.
Thank you, Sarah. Ryan, do you have anything to add on from Maryland?
I'll just add on too. Not only is the heat an issue, but also air quality. So electrification helps to remove the particulate matter associated with combustion, at least on site. And if you go through renewable energy, now you do remove all those combustion particulates. And when you put heat and air quality together, you have the perfect mix for a lot of sickness. And when we're talking about communities that are struggling for resources to begin with, they just don't have the ability necessarily to grapple with that. So by creating healthier environments, not only are we improving learning for the students, we're actually just helping with quality of life overall. And when done strategically, we can even get, in some instances, to a place where the schools, if they are net zero and electrified, can actually serve the greater community during those, we call them red alert days here in Maryland. They can serve as cooling centers during the summertime for the greater community. So now they're going beyond just serving the students, but they're literally serving everybody and giving them a break to get out of 90, 100-degree days.
Lovely. That sounds great. So the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law injected billions into the economy for building decarbonization, as Sarah's mentioned. And it's a first in terms of the sheer volume of funding for the buildings world. Sarah, can you speak some more on those key programs that are beneficial for school electrification?
Absolutely. This is the best part of my day, getting to talk about these new funds. So the largest pot of dollars available today for schools through the Inflation Reduction Act are, believe it or not, clean energy tax credits. Schools now have access to this novel payment mechanism called elective pay or direct pay that turns clean energy tax credits into cash reimbursements for doing this work. These tax credits are really powerful because they're non-competitive. They're available until 2032 and beyond, and there's no limits on this funding. So schools and districts can really build a strategy around embracing clean energy and using these federal dollars to make it cost effective. These tax credits are available for ground source heat pumps. Those heat pumps, right, are a key solution for building electrification. The solar that we can put on site to power those heat pumps, the energy storage that we can use to make sure we can play that resilience role that Ryan was just talking about. And also EV charging equipment and electric vehicles, which of course are another source of local air pollution and not great for young brains on the way to school. So tax credits available for schools to embrace all these clean energy machines. There are also some competitive grant programs specifically for schools, like the Renew America Schools program, which is run out of the Department of Energy. EPA has just put out an announcement for an air pollution in schools opportunity that's for nonprofits that are serving schools. And then, lastly, there are some big grant opportunities where schools are eligible beneficiaries. Things like the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants, which states and local regional planning offices are going to be beneficiaries of, and the Climate Justice Community Change Grants. So those are really the three buckets, the tax credits available to all, non-competitive, some competitive grant programs for schools, and then some big grant programs where schools can be part of that story.
Awesome. So you were saying the bulk of the IRA money available exists in the form of tax credits. How do schools actually access that money? Can you explain why direct pay represents such an important change in the tax system for public schools as they look to electrify?
Yeah, this is such a big deal, right? Because if schools want to electrify, that means transitioning to all electric HVAC solutions. As we talked about, that's the big meaty part of building electrification. And now, it can be really cost effective for them to do that with these tax credits and to get an additional tax credit to go solar, right? Those two pieces work so well together. So this is really going to be, I think, a huge wind in the sails for this electrification movement. Stepping back, the IRA, it really brings schools into the clean energy transition game here, right? The private sector has enjoyed the financial benefits of the move to clean energy for many years now, right? These tax credits that our schools are going to use have been around since 2008 for the solar industry. It's a reason why we have a robust solar industry and wind industry in this country. And now, thanks to electrify, our schools can get in on the game too, along with all of our other municipal entities. So this is a really exciting move. How schools actually get the money. So they do have to install eligible equipment as the first step. They're going to then do what's called a pre-filing registration with the IRS. You know, the IRS and schools are somewhat new to each other. So schools are going to raise their hand and identify their eligible project. They're going to then do a final filing with the IRS based on their school's fiscal year. So if you're like most schools and your fiscal year goes from July to June, your deadline every year is going to be November 15th. And then the IRS is going to process that tax return. It's going to pretend like you overpaid on your taxes, and they're going to issue you a cash reimbursement. So that's how it works. Install, pre-file, file, and get your money.
Lovely breakdown. Thank you. Ryan, how's the MEA bringing new schools into this game now that funding has opened the doors? How are you reaching a variety of communities and bringing these available dollars to their attention?
So we're taking really a multi-stakeholder approach, reaching out to all the school districts, going through basically a plethora of folks to speak to. So setting up meetings with teachers, setting up meetings with principals, setting up meetings with superintendents, even have reached out to a few conservation or sustainability clubs run by the students, to really get the word out there that, hey, there's this program out here and this is what it'll do for the school, and then connect the dots and speak to folks in a way that it's relevant. So if I'm speaking to the director of facilities, I'm going to talk about all the HVAC stuff, all the energy stuff. Whereas if I'm talking to a teacher, you know, they don't necessarily care about a VAV box. I can talk to them about, you know, how the sun makes energy and then how you can embed that in the curriculum. Whereas a CFO is going to be more interested in, well, how much is it going to cost, and demonstrate that it can save. So we're trying to give a unified message, but the message is customized based on the person hearing it, on their interests and their skill sets.
Nice. So a tailored approach.
Yes.
Sara, what's your take on balancing communication and the distribution of funding? How do we make sure all of our nation's schools, rural or urban, affluent or low income, how do we make sure we all move forward together?
I think what Ryan just laid out is so smart, right? We've got to talk to multiple parties. We've got to deliver a message that's relevant for what those different stakeholders care about and how they see their role in this work, right? I think that's really important. I think stepping back, you know, what we would love to see happen is that state leaders really see this huge IRA opportunity over the next decade. Those dollars are sitting in Washington, you know, unlimited, available for states to take down. And they really follow a state like Maryland's lead in taking a strategic approach here and saying, okay, how can we as states create a glide path for our districts, for our schools, to take down as many of these federal dollars as possible? And, you know, not only that, but how do we make sure that as a state, we are reaching out to our most traditionally under-resourced schools and helping them make a big leap forward in terms of healthy, efficient, resilient, decarbonized schools, right? So we want those schools that are really suffering the most burden here. We want to put extra effort into helping them getting to that starting line for electrification and support those districts in making use of these IRA clean energy tax credits.
Awesome. Thank you. So Ryan, the MEA's Decarbonizing Schools program has been around for a few fiscal years and funding rounds. It's a sort of leader, as Sara was mentioning. Now that you're managing the program, what does success for the program look like to you?
You know, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I really want to see at least one net zero school in every district. And to kind of piggyback on Sara, really what I've been trying to do, one of our areas of interest is energy efficiency capital. Whereas I've been talking to folks is deferred maintenance and how to green it. So if you don't know what deferred maintenance is, to put it very simply, it's something's broken, but it's not going to end the world. So you put it off because money has to go somewhere else. And defer, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. And so if we can really work with schools on greening and electrifying their deferred maintenance issues, that's the first step, because a lot of schools are, unfortunately, they just don't have the ability to go out and research what the next best thing is. So they're replacing parts with similar parts, and there's great opportunities there to get more energy efficient devices in. And then once they see that working, then we can start to tackle things like building envelope and really moving forward and saying, okay, we establish a good rapport for the low hanging fruit so that we can help them construct the next big, shiny, cool building. Because a lot of this infrastructure, it's not fancy. It's hidden behind walls or behind cover plates.
Gotcha. So the Band-Aids for those cuts are not cutting it anymore. We need a cast for the whole thing.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. So we're at the end of our time here. To close up the episode, we'll end with the Buildings Hub Live tradition, the lightning round questions. So Ryan and Sarah, in about a couple minutes each, what do you all want to see happen for public school electrification? And how does the progress of that electrification intersect with the education children are receiving in those buildings? Ryan, if you want to take it away.
Sure. Yeah, I would love to see every school embrace an electric pathway and really do it in a way that it complements the overall mission, and that's educating the next generation. And I think schools can not only educate our students in STEAM and STEM, and STEAM involves arts, and get folks involved, get them excited, because by doing that, we're preparing them as young as possible, getting them used to seeing what electrification looks like, because they're going to be our next round of engineers, or our next round of installers, or even our next round of teachers. And if those teachers go to another district where electrification is still back in the 90s, then they can say, well, this is what I've seen and learned, and this is how it works. And then you spread it. So for me, I think that would be a success, is just to get everybody involved at schools, from your smallest ones all the way up to your teachers, administrators, and parents, and just get them pumped about it.
Let's get them pumped. Sarah, and what would you like to add on?
Yeah, I think all the points that Ryan made are wonderful ones. And maybe I can add on by saying that when schools embrace climate solutions like electrification, they can really help young people who face substantial mental health challenges as they look at a future that's defined by rapidly changing climate, more extreme weather. A majority of young people are afraid, angry, or scared about climate change. So, when they can go to school, and we're showing here pictures from a wonderful school in Baltimore, Holabird, when they can go to school and kind of see these solutions at work, the title of a book comes to mind, The World Becomes What We Teach, right? And so if we want a world where humans are successfully navigating the challenges of climate change through innovation, through massive expansions of our skilled workforce, through sustainable mindsets, we need to start now in our schools.
Perfect. Thank you so much for wrapping it up. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Sarah and Ryan, very much for joining us and providing your expertise and insight, and to everyone in the live audience who participated. Should you wish to watch this episode again or share it with friends or colleagues, you can find it on the Atlas YouTube page, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. We encourage you again to check out our Buildings Hub platform and to join our electrification community today. Again, we just launched a new dashboard servicing all the data from the DOE's latest Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey, where you can find daily information across all building elements. Check it out. It's very cool. We hope you'll catch the next episode of Buildings Hub Live. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you all next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Buildings Hub Live. You can listen to this episode and all other installments in our podcast on the Atlas YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. If you're interested in additional content, check out our data, articles, and dashboards on Buildings Hub at atlasbuildingshub.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you again soon.